did it. Bow, dow, 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 da, 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 dow, dow, dow. It's a different theme song.
I like this better than last week's.
When things get hard and you don't think you can do it anymore, I'm Emmy, birth wizard.
And I'm Alex Barr.
And we remind you to breathe. Here we talk about all the uncomfortable surges to get you to open up about tough topics. And this week it's about inclusive language.
Which is a highly contested topic, and I'm so excited to tell everybody that they're wrong. I love when I get to do that.
Right. Yeah, it's so much fun.
You're being an asshole. That's my favorite thing to let people know.
Oh gosh. Yeah, it's the best. I don't think there's anything better than that. Oh. So, yeah.
So, you want to start with the history of maybe?
Yeah, I wasn't able to find like a catalyst moment or anything with inclusive language. I mean, obviously it's been inside of the queer community for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And so over time, as we've evolved in at least American culture, let's stick here, right? Yeah. Because it's where we work. It's become a more recognized thing that at least the birth community should embrace in about 2020 is when it really kicked off.
Really exploded, yeah.
Really exploded. There's been minor things here and there since about 2016 and 2017, but we're talking less than 5 years, right? One of the things that I thought was interesting during my research was that not every language is gendered. Like we think of English, or even my second language is Spanish. It's very gendered. It's very much it's about men and women splitting. However, I found out there are some languages without gender, which is Hungarian, Estonian, Finnish, which is kind of funny because all of those are kind of connected through. So something about that
region, each other.
Yeah. Region of the world. Don't use feminine or masculine, and they can use he, she for anyone. They just more refer to you as human rather than he, she, they,
which is
them.
Very nice,
right?
Yeah, you just get to be a human.
That would be nice. The thing that kind of kicked it off was Cori Bush did a testified in front of Emmy, testified for U.S. Congress, and during their testimony, they were talking about their own experience as a birther and how they almost lost their children, stating that the status of our healthcare system puts Black women, Black birthers, and Black children at risk. And this clip was played on Twitter and got really picked up, and it exploded, and people were more concerned about the fact that Cori used the term birthing person than anything else said in this clip. And she even came out and was like, I think it's fast. I'll read the quote directly. I testified in front of Congress about nearly losing my children during childbirth because the doctors didn't believe my pain. Republicans got upset about me using gendered inclusive language instead of the testimony of my babies nearly dying.
Which, again, is the, classic way to, avoid a topic is to, invalidate something else or focus on a different part of it that's, very small. Hey, we don't like the way you said this word, or we don't like this language, or instead of talking about what she was there to talk about.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, when did you get the exposure to inclusive language?
So I feel like I first heard of it. So my introduction to the birth world and the birth community, especially on Instagram, was very it started with trans and non-binary people that I had already followed, and I kind of fell into this hole a little bit.
Yeah.
I started following some doulas, Birdsong Brooklyn, and then they're always sharing people who are trans or non-binary and do this work. And so that was my initial thing into this, you don't see that like trans families having babies. You don't see that representation. And that was like my initial introduction into like the Instagram birth world.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like mine has been my understanding of that has been colored that way from the start.
It's interesting. Um, I remember uh, the first seahorse ad that I saw.
Mm-hmm.
It was a TLC special back in like 2005 or 2006.
Yeah.
I'm sure everyone knows who I'm talking about because that was like a big deal at that point. So yeah, that was my first exposure to anyone who was not identifying as woman
Mm-hmm.
birthing.
Yeah.
So I was 15 or 16. So I knew of the possibility.
Yeah.
And then I still thought it was a very niche thing, something very minor. I didn't become aware of non-binary as like a concept or people until like maybe 4 years ago. It
Mm-hmm.
was pretty recent.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh man, that's fucking fabulous. I love everything about that. And then after becoming a birth worker, it kind of feels like it's been happening at the same time of me being here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, oh, fucking obvious. I'm on board with this.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
And so, yeah, I can't say that there was like a thing where I was like, yep, this is my exposure. This is the moment, right?
And that's where like I feel I was actually kind of shocked when I expanded the people that I knew in the birth world, especially actually getting into it and meeting people. Then I was like, oh, that's inclusive language and care for like the queer community is like that's the niche, and the people outside of it are actually like super transphobic and super like mother is so important and such an they have to claim it, like they can't like let go of it, even if they're not talking about themselves, which is what's interesting.
I do think that's interesting, because I can speak to my own experience being someone who was uncomfortable even with like minor things that dealt with birth and pregnancy and like tying it to quote unquote divine femininity or like traditional femininity or any of that, because I don't see myself and I don't identify myself as feminine.
Mm-hmm.
I do identify as woman, but not feminine or goddess or any of these words, and it made me really uncomfortable when I was in those spaces, and that was pushed on me.
Oh yeah, they tie everything. Femininity is tied to womanhood, which is tied to motherhood, which does not have to be the case.
Yeah.
But that is how it is. So like they are so intrinsically linked. Like there's for a lot of people in their mind. And that paints a picture of a very particular person.
It does.
And it doesn't match a lot of people. Even if we're talking about people who still identify as women, that doesn't mean they fit into this defined femininity box.
Yeah. That's me. Yeah. That's me. 100% me.
Same.
I mean, like, more power to the people who, like, I almost had a sense of jealousy that I couldn't identify with that person who was like, oh my god, I feel like such a goddess in this moment, and I'm so connected with the universe and motherhood and like all of it, and they like had that synergy. And then the other part of me was like, big as eye roll, because it feels performative to me. And I think that's the biggest part why I got so into inclusive language is I wanted to be able to bring comfort to the person that I provide support, and for none of it to feel performative.
Yeah.
I never want someone, when I walk into a room and be like, hey, honey, right, for them to cringe at honey because they're like, oh, that was a pet name that so-and-so called. Like, I really try to make sure that the language I use and the things I say doesn't immediately create this like cringe inward.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that they,
hey girly,
right,
hey girl,
yeah,
hey woman,
right,
hey female,
right. Yeah. And I think that's really important, and the part that like called me to it.
Mm-hmm.
I also find it interesting by using inclusive language. There's never been a person who's come up to me and been like, your content's not for me because you don't use the word mother.
Yeah. which probably means that you're hitting your target market.
That
Just
for
saying.
sure.
Like that's what it sounds like. I spent a lot of time on Tumblr as a teenager, which
No way, no way, Alex.
by
no
my
way.
personality, you know. But that's where I was really introduced to like inclusive language and intersectional feminism and that kind of thing, and that's really colored like how I try to be so inclusive of people, because I understand that not everybody is going to identify with birthing person, but the people who do,
Mm-hmm.
it means a lot.
Yeah.
Right? It means so much when the whole world is like mother, mom, mommy, mother, mom, mother, like,
right.
And you don't feel that way.
Right.
You know? Like, you identify as something else. You identify as dad, or you
right.
identify as Baba, or all the hundreds of names you could feel more identified with than mom.
Right.
You know? And so I just always felt like, oh, that's easy.
Right.
You know? And I feel like there's my first point was going to be, I feel like there's a really big misunderstanding where if by using inclusive language that you have to use that for yourself.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
people feel that if you're being inclusive and you say birthing people, the same thing as like chest feeding or nursing instead of breastfeeding, that's how you have to identify to yourself.
Right.
And that's not true. Right. You know, my favorite thing is this TikTok that someone had posted, and someone was like, I'm sorry, I'm not calling my husband my gender non-conforming partner, blah, blah, blah. And like, first of all, you don't have to call your husband anything that he doesn't want to be called. You can call him husband.
Right.
And second of all, the word spouse is a gender neutral language for the person you're married to, and it has existed forever, but you want to go over the top, right? When you could say spouse, you could say partner when you're talking about someone that's not you.
Right.
Right? And I feel like that's so easy to do.
It is.
You know, and I remember someone getting upset with me at one job I worked at because I asked them if they had a partner, and he was like, what do you mean a partner? And I was like, well, you could have a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a husband or a wife, or I don't know. I'm not making any assumptions.
Like a person you hang out with on Saturday night
yeah.
and play video games, and that's like y'all's thing.
I was just curious, you know, like, you know, I wasn't making assumptions about you. I was doing the opposite. I was not assuming anything about you, which is the point.
Right.
You know?
Exactly. I think to speak to that of like non-assuming and also not taking on the term for yourself, it is such a quick path to allow someone who's a part of a marginalized community to get that tip of the hat where no one else has to be tipped in, right?
Yep.
Because there are people out there who identify as non-binary or trans, however, cannot come out yet due to the safety or whatever their comfort level is. And it is such a quick way for you to be like, hey, so who's your partner? Or like, hey, I use these words, and they can be like, oh, cool. I can unload and actually be me around you.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes back to that whole, like, don't be an asshole.
Yeah, that's my motto. Don't be an asshole. Be nice to people. And if that's, like, your intention, then you can take in this education without being offended by it. Because that's the thing, is we're supposed to be offended because people feel that motherhood is being taken from them, or their identity as a mother is being stolen from them, because people who don't identify as mothers are having babies. Like, you know?
Yeah.
But what does that say about you if that's all that took to take this identity from you?
For sure. I think it's the other side that ends up happening, and I can speak as this when I was going through and figuring out the terms I wanted to use and all of that, especially inside of social media or when I talk, because I teach classes and all of that, of what do I feel comfortable saying, because you can get so caught up on like person with uterus or like birthing person or like menstruator with whatever, like people end up like overcomplicating it, which is why I went with just plain old birther.
Yep.
Because it was the quickest way through, and I knew I could like incorporate that into my language very, very quickly.
Yeah. And it doesn't maybe draw as much attention to people who are going to have a negative reaction to it.
Yeah, exactly. How can you be upset? I'm just informing anyone who wants to give birth, right?
Yeah.
Nothing else. Birther. You're a birther. You're a birther. Birthy, birther, birther. It's the same way that I have with, I ended up adopting the term body feeding instead of breast or chest feeding, and I'll switch between breast and body feeding very in and out.
Interchangeably.
And to me, like, finding these terms is really important because you need to incorporate it in your everyday speech and all of that. I'm still getting down the concept, and it doesn't help that we've been in a pandemic, so I haven't been able to introduce myself a lot.
Yeah.
But I've been trying to get into the habit of, hi, I'm Emmy, and I go by she, her.
Yeah.
Like, I'm really, really trying to get into the habit of that. Again, because if I introduce myself with my pronouns, then there's no way for anyone around me to be like, oh, well, maybe she won't respect my pronouns, or like maybe it'll be this, or maybe like I can just break the ice and make it weird.
Do you feel like you had any hard time switching your language or using they them pronouns or switching to birther? Like,
so the most difficult thing I've had an issue with is when, and I'll speak openly about this. I have someone in our family who came out as non-binary during the pandemic, and it's something that I've known about them for a while. I mean, I've known them since they were like 14, 13, 14, and so it was one of those where I was like, I know you, I know what's going on, but I'm gonna give you time to like figure it out. And when they came out, I had a really difficult time changing my language, and I felt so like defeated because I was like, you literally like rant at people. Like it's so fucking simple. Just use the words, like all of this. But it was so habitual
because you had already had a relationship with this person,
right? And they were being identified and like spoken about in a certain way. So I was like having a hard time like switching gears, and I even made sure to ask them, because they have a relationship with my kids, like, what do you want them to call you? Do you still want the same term? Do you want something different? Because I never want you to walk into the home and the kids yell a thing, and then you're like, ugh.
And that makes you uncomfortable.
Right. Yeah. So the thing I've had more difficulty with personally is like being okay with fucking it up sometimes.
Yeah.
Because I am such a like Hufflepuff about this.
I know, you're so sweet.
Because I really never want someone to feel like I messed it up on purpose, or that I don't respect them, or that I don't see the struggle or like what it's like.
And like see them for who they are.
Correct. Yeah. So that's the part that I've had the most difficulty with. Things like body feeding and birther, once I found those words, I was like, those are it. Those are my words now. I got it. Like, so I didn't struggle with that. But I think it just came down to that I wish I had known those words when I was birthing.
Yeah.
Because I much would have preferred that rather than walking into an appointment and then being like, hey, Mama, how you doing? And it's like, I'm not your mother. Please don't call me that. That's weird.
And I feel that,
here you go.
Oh, thank you. I feel that my struggle has probably been with like the pet names.
Yes.
I have a tendency to like call people baby or like call people honey or sweetheart or whatever.
I swear that comes from service work.
Yeah.
Because you want to do a term of endearment quickly. No, you're good. Term of endearment quickly so you can get tipped better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of sticks, and then I'm calling all my coworkers that, and then I'm calling my kid that. And
I called everyone honey.
Yeah.
But it took a while for it to be beat out of me, and it's because honey can come across condescending.
Yeah.
And sometimes these words can
And that's how people like in the South will use it.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. Oh, honey. Whoops.
So being out of the South for a while, I feel like it's kind of left me, like that specifically. But that is kind of mine, because I will find myself like typing it in like a text message and then like erasing it. I'm like, what do I call you? Your name, right?
Yeah, your name. Do you ever feel weird calling someone who identifies as woman or mother buddy? Because I use buddy a lot.
I feel like you would use buddy. I really do. I feel like that fits you very, like, and that's again, like, this is a little bit off topic, but some of those pet names are very, like, specific to who the person is.
Sure.
Right?
For sure.
So that's, like, totally on brand with Emmy.
Yeah.
He's like, hey, buddy.
How's it going, buddy? Yeah.
I've switched to friend.
Friend is a good one.
I'm a big fan of, like, hey, friend. You know, that kind of
Friend's
thing.
Friend's a good one.
But I feel that the easiest way for me to make the switch to inclusive language is to try to change it in my head and try to change it when there's low stakes, right? Ooh. So when I'm talking to my husband about something I saw on Instagram, I'm making sure I'm using the right pronouns. Or if I don't know this person's pronouns, I know I can use they, them as a catch-all, right?
Right.
And that is what got me rerouted my brain from like she or her, he or him. And and it's funny because my that was something with my husband. I would always be like, it's really easy to use they, them, and people use them in non-plural situations all the time because otherwise they would literally
oh my god, I can't believe they cut me off.
Yeah. You don't say, I can't believe him or her cut me off. He or she cut me off, right? You don't say that.
No.
You know, that's what they write in, articles and stuff like that. But that's not what, that's not how people speak. Mm-mm. So I think inclusive language is more common than we thought. And this is something we were talking about before. There's people, don't say mailman as much. Like, they don't say, like, fireman as much. Like, some of that stuff's still in our general vocabulary, but we've been on the push to, like, become more inclusive in our language for a long time.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
You don't call every doctor sir and he, and, like,
that has been one that I have been trying to reroute. So, I mean, this goes into biases and all of that. When I am told a role of a person, I will immediately flip into what gender it is. And it's something that I personally struggle with in the way of, like, it happened to me last week. Someone was telling me about a Dr. Baldwin, and I was like, oh, I have heard of him. And the person was like, it's a she. And I was like, oh, fuck. I need to work on my biases.
Yeah.
But I think that's a really easy way to start to, like, flip it too, is, like, if you start to use they in those moments. The other way I like started to do it is, have you guys seen Ghostbusters? You guys, like, as if you all are here, but, like, have you seen Ghostbusters?
I've seen the female version.
Oh, shoot! No!
I knew you were gonna react that way. I was like, ooh,
it's cool.
I've only seen the one.
It's cool. It's fine. It's just a classic that like my entire personality is built off of. It's fine. There's a sequence in it where a god appears and they end up speaking to the crew and they're like, "Are you a god?" And one of the guys goes, "No, we're not." And they, like, basically almost kill all the guys. Mm-hmm. And so one of the other guys turns to him and it's like, when someone asks you if you are a god, you say yes, right? So I think of that with inclusive language. When someone tells you who they are, you say yes.
Yeah.
It's none of my goddamn business how you got there or what your journey is or, like, why you said that this is how you want to be preferred and, like, referred to. Got it, friend.
Yeah.
I'm on
that
board.
goes to validating people's identities. Like, who someone says they are, you should believe them. Like, and that was one of the things that I knew, but was kind of, like, hammered in my childbirth educator class. They were like, you get to decide what words you use for yourself and your family, and people should respect that. Mm-hmm. And you should respect that for your clients. Right? You should ask them how they want their body to be talked about, how they want their children, their parenting, all of that stuff. And you should respect that. Because you should believe someone when they're like, this is who I am, right? that seems like the duh. Like,
Right.
it seems like a given that if someone says, I go by he, him, and that's it, I'm going to believe you.
Right.
I'm not going to investigate everybody and, like, see if they're who, like, I believe you. Like,
Right.
I don't have to question it.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Um, you know, you saying that brought up the memory of I went through some trauma informed training, and in trauma informed trainings, all of them, it doesn't matter who you take it through, what you take it through, they're all going to talk to you about how important language is and how you can avoid trauma with that language. So now looking back, like thinking on it, I had like 3 or 4 different trauma informed classes that I took during my early part, like the first 3 or 4 months that I became a doula, of taking those classes, and that really solidified the like, well, this is the part I can do to avoid trauma, so
Yeah.
it's what I'm gonna do.
Yeah.
So if you say that everything went left, it went left. Let's go ahead and confirm that and like affirm you in it, and then we'll go ahead and unpack that here in a minute. But like, let's affirm you in all of this language, and then it goes into failure language, and the words that we choose can really deeply affect someone. So why wouldn't I use the terms that are friendliest?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they are the friendly.
Right.
So how do you feel about people who are so adamantly against using inclusive language?
This is the part that makes me really uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
because there's 2 pieces of my soul when that happens. There's one that's it's really sad, because obviously there's some sort of pain there that's making them hold on to the terminology so tightly. And it could be their own traumas, it could be that they had really had to fight to become a mother, whether it was through infertility or it took them a long time to find a partner or whatever, right? But they feel tight over that term, and that this feels like an attack. So that makes me really sad. The other part of me is fuck you. Like literally fuck you. Just like fuck off. Fuck off. And it comes from me thinking that you're ignorant. Yeah. Like I have no other place in my heart for you other than you must be in such a small world.
Yeah.
Because the only way you could hold that view is that your world is so small that you've never had exposure to people who are truly oppressed, and truly never being affirmed in who they are, and truly having to fight to be seen. And that's where I am.
That's like the perfect way to
like
put it too.
I get really sad and then sad again. Like so sad. Because if we go off of the iceberg, it's all just sadness. Like
it's sadness and it's trauma and it's this like fear of being stripped of what you feel like makes you you.
Right.
And in turn is like these people who are holding on to motherhood so tightly because they don't want their identity taken away, they're in turn stripping identity from people who are saying, I gave birth and I'm not a mom.
Right.
In turn they're hurting people with their hurt and hurting people with their exclusion.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot of my frustration that comes with this, like, motherhood and birth are so tightly connected is because it's very often tied to oppression.
Yeah.
It's tied to the oppression and the pain and the hardships that come with being a parent or being a mother in these people's eyes, that's why they're holding on so tightly. Because they identify with all of the bad stuff about being a parent and being a mom, right?
Interesting.
I really feel like a lot of it is tied to, like, they want people to understand the oppression that maybe they feel in being a parent and being a mom and being raised as a woman, and a lot of the duties and the expectations that are put on that.
That's interesting. So is there, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, in your theory then, is there almost a jealousy that you can drop that part? Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I feel like. I feel like it's like if you get to be who you want to be and you get to do what you want and you're not tied down by patriarchy and these domestic duties and these care tasks and things like that in the same way that I am, like, I think that's jealousy. And I think that is probably why a lot of people are frustrated by it. You know?
I mean, so
That's my theory, at least.
There's a part of me that doesn't want to bring it up because I I grew up as a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
I no longer identify as Christian. I identify as a Jew because Jesus was a Jew. Anyway, but there is a large section of birthwork that's grounded in people coming to it because of their religious beliefs and birth work and all of that. And I have a hard time with mainstream American Christianity because I think it's only mainstream American Christianity that is like holding so hard
onto like the way things used to be.
Yeah. Or just that, not recognizing that, if Jesus didn't have sexual desires, he was asexual, so he was a part of the LGBTQIA. Anyway,
I love these little like fast talking tangents.
Yeah, I have lots of feels on it, but I think it's fascinating when that particular community that identifies as Christian will use scripture to attack a community that more than likely Jesus would have walked with and loved on, and it's shown even in the Bible that he hung out with eunuchs, which were fucking trans people.
Yeah,
that's what they were. So it just like blows my mind because again, it goes back to that like sadness of like not understanding who you're following.
Yeah.
And what your beliefs are set in. And look, man, I'll fight you. Like literally, I'll fight you on this one. But I have a difficult time with it. And inclusive language, I think, is like the simplest and kindest thing you can do.
Yeah.
And I am all about spreading kindness as much as possible.
And it's really the bare minimum, especially when we're talking about what the queer community has to go through as far as pregnancy and birth and in life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's really simple. It's and of course you're going to make mistakes and it's hard to make the switch, but once you make the switch, it's not that bad, And I just feel I have known and loved trans people and queer people in my life. I'm queer myself. Like,
yeah, you and I are both sleeper queers, as they're known. Sleeper queers.
That's so funny because I've never heard someone say that. But yeah, so it's, again, it feels like when someone tells you who they are, you should believe it.
Yeah.
And it feels like I want people to feel safe with me when they know me or they hear me speak, or because I don't want to isolate people. I don't want to make people feel like othered. And I know that I know that trans and queer people go through so much invalidation of who they are, of who they're married to, over and over and over again. And if I can be like a little bit of like respite for that,
yes,
then I'm going to do it.
Yes.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Like, it's like the tiniest little bit of thing that can maybe make things a little bit easier. Yes. In a world that's set up to do
harm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think going along with that, the thing that I always think about is like, I really want someone when they're around me to feel like they hung out with Mr. Rogers. Like, I really do. I want it to feel like I'm singing you the song, like, I like you just the way you are, right? Yeah. Like, I don't want anyone to have like an inkling that um, I would make them unsafe. And it goes beyond just using inclusive language. I really am trying to make sure that when people talk to me about like who I should go as a provider, I recognize what your identity is and who you are as a person. And there's certain people you should not go to.
Yeah.
Like, these are ways I can keep you safe and help you through this journey of birth, because there's going to be people that you should not be around.
Yeah.
And it's crummy that I have to keep track of that.
Yeah. But it is like a matter of safety.
Right. It is.
You know?
And that goes back to what Corey Brooks was talking about of like, it's amazing that what people picked up on was inclusive language and not about my children almost dying.
Yeah.
And talking about the struggle of being black and birthing. Like, that just shouldn't be what we're focusing on.
That shouldn't be the focus, yeah.
I mean, rad. We got a bunch of people talking about it. But also,
not the topic at hand.
Come on. Yeah. I think it is something though that is so easy to do. And so I do wonder where the difficulty lies. Um, and I can only come back to the idea that you really have a very small worldview. And I used to make the joke, like, you give out your phone number with just the 7 digits, you don't even use an area code. Like, that's how small your world is.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Don't even understand it. Of, like, this is how big your community is. Which, like, awesome. I'm glad you guys all know each other's names. But there's such a great big wide world out there. And it's full of so much color and cool shit.
And I've seen, and I've seen a couple of, like, larger accounts that are in the birth world, maybe not birth workers, but like be like, okay, how many people actually identify with this, right? And they'll do polls or they'll do whatever, and I've seen them take that as a reason to say like, oh, then I don't have to worry about it. The smallest percentage of people or not enough people said that this is matter to them or that they identified that way, so I'm just going to keep using mother. And I'm okay with that because the number of people needed is probably small and they probably don't follow me.
But they responded to your survey. Even if it was just one person, that person's following you.
Yeah. And it's people with larger accounts and it's people, you know, like, and that's where it feels like so, and then you get the other accounts who are just so like, this is feminine, this is divine feminine, this is woman, like,
right.
You know?
I think the other side that's now started to happen to me, like talking about that safety thing and keeping tabs, I have now turned into that TikToker who challenges people's like boundaries and rules immediately when meeting them. Like, hey, so I am bi and you wouldn't know it. What do you think about that? Like starting to
trap people,
right? Like preemptively, like.
Yeah.
Which is also not a great mindset to have with any of this because...
Well, and when you experience it enough and you live in the world long enough, it's like kind of like sometimes waiting for people to show you that that's who they are. I'm from Missouri. I've spent a lot of time in the Midwest. I was, you know, part of the Southern Baptist Church when I was younger. It was just like, you're kind of waiting for the terrible stuff to start falling out of someone's mouth, you know? But now we just have social media, and then people will just, like, post ridiculous opinions on social media instead.
Where they out themselves. Thank you, guys. Please do it more often. I appreciate not having to really
And I don't want
you.
to, like, shame people who are struggling with that, or, I don't know, because I do feel like there has to be a reason, right, that people are so uncomfortable with this. And what is that reason? You know, that's what my struggle is, because shaming people doesn't change behavior. You know, it just doesn't. It forces them into their respective sides of the internet and sides of the political spectrum, you know? And so then how do we move forward? How do we do better? How do we change language?
I think that's the other part of why I started using the inclusive language is I did not want for another person to have to be an educator when I could take up that mantle. Um, because look, I don't have a big following yet, but like,
but you will because you are a local celebrity.
Right, exactly.
We're gonna make you a national celebrity.
National,
okay?
Amy
That's
Fields.
the next goal.
But my hope is that I can be someone who's an educator, so that way others who are marginalized in that way don't have can like save a bit of that emotional labor.
Yeah.
Like if I can save an ounce of someone's emotional labor of explaining why birther or body feeding or like why we respect someone's identity immediately in my trainings or whatever, and it's just one less person who has to be harmed.
Yeah.
Like, oh my god, thank God. Like
thank goodness.
Like that's truly the goal, because that's one less person that has to be healed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think that's where a lot of this is born out of, is me being too much of a Hufflepuff. I just want to make friendship bracelets, guys, and like.
And I think it's just, I think a lot of it is like a lack of education, and a lot where people don't have an understanding about what that means, or even a knowledge that trans people have always existed.
Yeah.
You know, and in ancient cultures, there's history of that, and there's history of non-binary people and things like that.
And I think that's the part that like goes missing, right? So it's only in white European cultures where trans and queer identities were starting to be persecuted, and that was due to the influence of the Roman Catholic Church. Anyway, when you like really dive into it, it is a small subsection of the world's culture that does this.
Yeah.
And it was only through their colonization, I'm sorry to get really deep, guys, sorry, throughout the world that caused a lot of this hate to like get planted in many regions of the world.
Yeah.
But if you truly look at all of these cultures in antiquity, they praised and worshipped and like loved on each other no matter what your identity was. Yeah. And you were accepted as a part of society. So I have like no patience for it.
Yeah. And I see a lot of like a lot of this is a trend, you know, being non-binary or trans is a trend, and yeah. I laugh at that one because I did see like a Facebook like mom group post that was like, my child says that they're or that they want to go by he now. Like, I know this is a trend, so what do I do? And I just remember my mom always telling me, which, no hate to my mom, but always telling me that being bi was a phase, and like, yeah, people just needed to make up their mind and things like that.
Your mom and my mom must have hung out, because my mom told me when you turn off the lights, anything can feel good. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And then I chose, like, I was out of the house and I was visiting my mom, and she was having like, oh, do you remember when like all of your friends were bisexual? Like, that's so funny. Ha ha ha. It was like such a trend to be. And I was like, no, like,
I just found all the queer kids in school.
Yeah. Yeah. And like some of them are still bisexual. Some of them have decided their identity is different. That doesn't mean it's a phase.
Right.
And oh, by the way, I am bisexual as well. And thanks, this is my coming out. Like, it was like a very like, just to prove you wrong, I'm going to come out right now.
There's still probably the most profound thing that I read recently was your partner does not determine your identity, your sexual identity, right? And I think that way with gender and like how you outwardly express yourself does not actually show your gender identity, right? Because there's so much of like, well, she looked like a she, right? Like, yeah. But why?
Yeah. But see, I even remember being younger, being a server, and how mortifying it was to call someone by the wrong.
Yes.
The wrong sir, yes. When they are, I'm not a sir, right? that is mortifying for every single person who does that, right?
Yes.
So it would be so much simpler if you just stopped saying it. I stopped saying it. I stopped saying sir, ma'am very quickly because that sucks when you do that. You feel bad. So why do we not feel bad when someone's like, oh, my pronouns are they, them, right? And you keep using he or you keep using she or whatever.
The main argument I've heard is for the neo pronouns and like, oh, they just made those up.
Yeah. All words are made up, man. Have you ever read Frindle? Yeah, it's like that kid's book. It like stuck with me forever. You can call anything whatever you want, exactly. And it doesn't matter. Exactly. And the only people who are gonna be mad are the old people, because in that book, the guy's like, "This is a pen. This is not a Frindle." But like that was the whole point of like the book. Like, right. Words do not matter. They were all made up.
But it does matter to that person. So just use the fucking neo pronoun. Like. Just use it. And how often are you like truly, like, and that's the part that like blows my mind. How often are you going to be like this? Oh, Alex, she's right here next to me, and I'm going to make sure to use all of her pronouns. Like, you're not going to do that. Yeah. It's about respecting them when you walk away.
Mm-hmm. So, and how you speak about them when they're not there. You know? And then the other thing is you can always use someone's name. If you really are having a hard time with it, you can say, oh, yeah, Emmy. Right? Yeah. Emmy went to the store, and Emmy got a piece of pizza. Whatever. You can just use people's names. Right. And I think that is one of the things that helped me early on as well. Like, oh, if I'm struggling with that, I'm just going to use their name. Yeah. Right? You know? But I also take people at first glance. If they tell me what their name is and what their pronouns are, I'll probably use them forever because... Again, I'm not a detective. I'm not trying to figure out what your identity is. I'm going to believe whatever you say.
I'm not here to steal it. I'm not
okay.
Right. Yeah, it is fascinating to me, all of this. And I think it only gets more fascinating because I have kiddos, and I have 3 kiddos with wildly different expressions for themselves. And... I've done a talk in the past about when I was pregnant with my first. I knew in my like bones that this kid was going to be born boy, like with boy parts, right? Yeah. So I remember getting really upset when people would be like, "Oh, it's probably a girl because of these symptoms or whatever." I'm like, I'm telling you, it's a boy, right? But if this boy ever comes down the stairs and is like, Mom, this is who I am, I'm going to be so stoked because I raised them in such a way where they could feel comfortable in this house to be whoever they want to be. And I make so many strides in the world to make sure that when they leave this house that they're still going to be loved on in that same way. Yeah. Because too many people are like, oh my God, you like raised them so affirming and all of this. It's still a scary fucking world out there. Yeah. Because there's still trans people being murdered for just being them. Yeah. And one of the most profound like stories I heard from one of my trainings was the way that a Black trans man knows that they pass is that they start to get harassed by police. Sorry, I'm starting to cry.
Every time. It's so sad.
So that's like things that I think about, and I try and make sure that the footprints that I make in this world, again, are out of kindness and like I'm too much of a Hufflepuff.
Oh, you're so sweet. Yeah, and that's where I have sought out the extra education, which I think is very easy to do. There's lots of trans and queer birth workers that provide trainings like that. Yes. Mas the doula is someone I've taken. Yes. Like a class from that I thought was really great and really informative, and just even following people who are posting about this stuff, it gets you more familiar with the language. It gets you more familiar with that stuff. Because sometimes I think people's lack of using is they just don't see it. They don't see other people using inclusive language. They don't see other people who are saying, these are my pronouns, or I'm a seahorse dad, or I'm a non-binary parent, like all of that stuff. Like, and if you see it, that stuff is beautiful. It's beautiful to see parents affirmed and like being the parents that they want to be.
Yeah.
Like, if you really are open to it, it's like beautiful to see someone being exactly who they are.
It is.
You know? And again, you should be nice.
Oh.
You know?
Yeah.
And that's why I really just tried to be nice and respectful of people and believe them when they tell me who they are. And then at the same time, I've backed that up with education. That has really solidified those like lessons in my mind.
Yeah, and I think it's important that you brought up like that there's plenty of individuals on social media who are ready to educate you, and that's fucking free.
Yep.
It is free.
Yeah.
Like, we're not even talking about my doula training with uh, the advocates, birth advocates.
Oh, birthing advocacy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That one was $199 where I learned about queer and trans fertility, right?
Yeah.
That might not be in everyone's means. I get that, but there's so many accounts out there that are free that will teach you a lot of this.
Yeah.
And it's so important to decolonize and like uproot everything possible inside of your feed, because it also is a really easy way to signal to people that you are a safe place.
Yeah.
When they're able to look through your following and
I always
be
checking to see who people
right.
are following.
Yeah.
Or if I look at someone's account, I'm like, oh, all these people follow. Like, that kind of tells you.
You follow Chris Pratt, we're not friends.
I don't follow any celebrities, actually. Because that shit's just toxic, and advertisements
right.
make you feel bad about yourself, and then here's an advertisement.
Right. Yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah. I get you.
I try to follow like real people. You know, if I follow a brand, it's because I want to make a purchase, but I'm too broke to make a purchase. And then so after I purchase, I unfollow.
I need you in my feed to remind me how poor I am.
Remind me that I want this eventually.
That's funny. Yeah, I think that's really important though, of those free resources. And there's tons on TikTok and Instagram alone, and then there's so many on YouTube, so many. And that was a lot of my exposure was through YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up following this guy by the name of Jamie. I think he goes by Jamie Dodger.
Mm-hmm.
And oh man, Sam Collins. Those are two trans men that I follow on YouTube. They're hilarious and really easy to digest. It's not even educational. It's just them talking about life and how they see the world. And it's like, oh, okay, like human interaction and like their humanity and like because I wasn't brought up around trans individuals. I was brought up in very conservative countries. If you guys didn't realize this, I wasn't brought up in the States. So the LGBTQA experience really was not there for me. I didn't get that experience until I came to the States.
Yeah.
And even then, it's lacking.
Oh my gosh,
here.
Yeah.
So the place I got the most exposure is when I used to visit Berlin.
Interesting.
It's like one of the queer capitals of the world.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So that's where I got most of my exposure, but I don't speak German, so I couldn't make much.
You couldn't get that much exposure because
right.
you had no idea what they were saying.
Right, exactly. But yeah, so I'm just exposing yourself in simple ways, and again, free.
Yeah.
You don't have to pay for a subscription or anything. Yeah. So.
And you don't have to hold on to that hate, and
right.
You don't have to use, you don't have to use those words for yourself to be respectful to other people.
I think that's really important.
And because I see that a lot, like, oh, I'm sorry, I love breastfeeding so much, and it's so important to me that I could never use any other term. Nobody's asking you to use a different term for yourself.
Right.
Right? It's, do you want to use a more inclusive term when you're talking about other people? Or before someone has told you what they're comfortable with? Because the moment someone says, yeah, I say breastfeeding, I identify as a woman, she, her, right. You're free to call them that. You're not right. supposed to still, but in the same frame, if someone says my pronouns are they, them, and I prefer nursing, or I prefer chest feeding, or I prefer,
right.
Body feeding, then
go for that.
That's what because you're supposed to respect that.
I think the other part of this that is important to touch upon, because this is my education with trauma-informed care, is that breastfeeding, mother, even like truly like medical terms can be really triggering for those who have had sexual assault,
yeah,
or are survivors in any sort of sense. because that stuff could have been used in such a gross way with them for a
Yeah.
very long time, or even just one instance, and that can be very triggering.
Yeah.
So it's not just queer individuals that we're talking about here. We're talking about individuals who have been through stuff that we can never imagine. I can never imagine because that's not a part of my story. I'm very fortunate. Um, but I never wanted to be the person using that language and it's bringing them back to a place.
Yeah.
Um,
That's actually a great point.
because often when we're talking about inclusive language, we're talking about it in the sense of like queer and trans people, but also there's those individuals who are like, please don't use breasts because such and such person kept calling them breasts throughout the, and I just can't, right? Just so much easier if you just use chest.
Yeah.
Cool. We never have to have this discussion again. You never have to hear that word again.
And if you start out in the more inclusive ways, the chances of someone having to correct you, because there is a lot of emotional labor in having to ask someone to stop using gendered language around them is a lot. And again, it does compromise people's safety in some way because they don't know who they're talking to is a safe place to ask that. So sometimes they don't say anything.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the assumption, is that everybody who feels that way is supposed to be so loud about it and correct every person, when sometimes they can't do that safely. Or it's also really freaking hard to be like, that is not my name. Those are not my pronouns. Like, over and over and over again, you know?
Yeah, I go by Emmy. Like, this is such a small way to compare it. But I go by Emmy. My actual name is Micaela.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I go by Emmy is because it is exhausting
to correct people
over and over again. And they also want to treat my name as like a gimmick. They want to be like, oh, let me see if I can say it right. And it's like, just call me Emmy. Like, I'm done with you. Like, just call me Emmy. Please, doctor's appointment, don't call me Michaela, because that's not my name.
Yeah.
Like, and I usually space cadet out, and then they're upset with me.
Because you're like, my name's Emmy.
Right.
I don't know.
Like, it's either Emmy or Michaela, but, like, don't call me Michaela, because I don't know that chick. Like, she's over there somewhere, but not me. But and that's such a small way to compare it. But that's a ton of emotional labor every time I arrive to a place, and I know I'm going to have that interaction of like, this is my name. Can you please say this? Like, and we're not even talking something that's potentially triggering. We're just talking about annoying.
Yeah, just annoying. Yeah, I'm on the other end of the spectrum where I literally don't care what people call me. I'm like, whatever. I like worked with someone for like 6 months, and she kept calling me Alexa. I just let her call me. It was like, we finally hung out outside of work one time, and somebody else was like, that is not Alexa. That is Alex. And because at some point, I didn't correct her the first time, and then like I didn't know we were going to become friends, and I didn't want to correct her, and then when I was a server, I'd be like, my name is Alex, and they'd be like, oh, Alice? And I'd be like, sure.
Right.
Allison? Sure. My boss would be like, you said their server's name is Allie?
Right.
Who is that? I was like, probably me.
Right.
I don't care.
I think it's interesting. I wonder if part of that comes from, and it's interesting that it's being brought up in this way, because my name is tied to my heritage and who I identify as.
Yeah.
It's really difficult for me to accept anything but proper, or let me make it easy for you. I gave you an option to make it easy. So like, just use the thing. You spell me, right?
Yeah.
Like, I make it as simple as possible.
Yeah.
I always do a cutesy joke of like, Emmy, like the awards, or like, you know.
Yeah.
So, but my name's tied to my great grandmother, who was a revolutionary, and all sorts of stuff. So there's a lot of pride tied behind that name. So I wonder if you like are cool with it, because there's not that like,
because I have absolutely no culture.
I didn't say that, just to make it clear,
but it's true. So I totally understand that the culture behind it is like such a motivating factor, but I have none.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, my husband and I actually joke that like we get along because our culture is being military children, and like that's our culture. We have nothing else.
Military children do have their own culture, though.
Yeah, we do.
They really do.
Yeah.
being one. Yeah, it's a whole different ballgame. It's a whole, yeah, yeah. But I do think that's interesting because, again, it ties into this inclusive thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you were encountered with language, you might be more passive because you're like, whatever, like,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah,
Yeah, but I don't know. It still makes me like, I don't care, but that doesn't mean that someone else wouldn't.
right,
And that doesn't mean that I wouldn't like learn how to say your name correctly. You
right,
know, if that's what you asked me to do.
right.
You know?
Yeah, I think it's fascinating though. This entire topic of why language matters is very fascinating to me, especially being like someone who speaks multiple languages and like understands how differently things can hit your ear and
Yeah.
what it evokes. So I think it's neat that you and I found each other and we both were like, hell yeah, inclusive language,
Yeah.
duh. Like,
stop being a dick. Like, I don't know, and I am at some point where you're like, on the other hand, like, F you. Like, fuck you.
right,
Because it's like, okay, come on.
right,
You know, especially when people do it so purposefully or they will so blatantly say, I do not support this and I will not say these things. That's where my frustration comes from.
I think it's fascinating when the joke is still made of like I identify as a duck helicopter or whatever.
Oh
Again, being someone who used to do stand up, I'm like, that's not even a good joke, bro. Like, make a good joke. If we're gonna make a joke that's like, offensive, like, make it funny.
My literal favorite thing is on TikTok when people who are being transphobic that they get it wrong.
Yes,
like
the
they will
accidental
accidentally, they will be like, "You will never be a man," and they're like, "Cool, I don't want to be a man. I'm a woman." Like, you know, like, thank you. Like, the
all women are women.
Like the things where it's accidentally
Yes.
affirming because you're trying so hard, but you're so confused by which way to be an asshole.
My favorite are accidental allies. There's something so wholesome about them. And like, oh, slugger.
You thought you had something there.
You struck out so hard,
like
buddy.
You really have no idea what's going on. All right, I think that's a good place to end it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you.
Thanks for tuning in.
Hey, guys, we're like a fifth of the way there for subscribers, so we can start to get Alex back to therapy. So, like, keep us subscribing.
Yes.
Keep us subscribing.
Keep subscribing. Come talk to us. Send us an email.
Yeah.
I still haven't got an email, guys. Send us an email. Tell us what you think of the episode.
Yeah.
Tell us you want to come be a guest on our episode, on our podcast.
We need guests. Send us over ideas for topics or give us your input. We're on just about everything. We're here on Twitch live. We're over on YouTube and
we're on like all the Spotify, Apple Podcasts, blah blah blah,
Anchor, the whole 9 yards. But until next time, I'm Alex. I'm Emmy, the birth wizard.
And I'm Alex. Bye. See you next time.
For sure.